It's not about the money. It's about what you did. I know I messed up. Okay. She looked me in the eye at 7:58 a.m. and said calmly, "Either you improve or I will fire you." I didn't argue. I nodded, left her office, and stood in the hallway, feeling the floor tilt. My name is Daniel Harper. I'm 34, the sort who keeps a spare tie in his desk because he forgets the first one at home. A failed startup carved a crater in my savings and my pride. I took this operations job for structure, not glory. And learned structure is a thin shield when your boss speaks in ultimatums. Catherine Wells is 47, the CEO. People whisper about sharp mind, sharper heels, and elegance like a private weather system. Not because she's beautiful, though she is, but because she never wastes a movement. This morning, the door clicked. I delivered a vendor analysis 12 hours late and soft around the edges. Not a scandal, but margins matter around Catherine Wells. She held the report like it weighed more than paper and asked 3 questions I should have asked myself. Hence the sentence that landed like a stamp on my record. I went back to my desk and opened the spreadsheet. Numbers lined up obediently, but panic tugged at the edges of every cell. One more mistake and I'd be back to interviews and polite rejections. So I stayed put. I reworked assumptions called suppliers, chased a missing data point, and watched the report begin to breathe like a living thing. By early evening, the office had thinned. I printed the new version at 6:12 p.m. Catherine Wells's door was still cracked. She sat at her desk with the city stacked like coins in the window behind her. "Do you have a minute?" I asked. She gestured to the chair up close. She didn't look ruthless. She looked tired, unexpectedly human. I walked her through the changes. Why the freight estimate had been wrong. Why the West Coast warehouse could carry more. Why my first pass had been timid when the numbers called for nerve. She didn't nod. She just watched, pencil still, eyes steady. When I finished, she tapped the margin twice. "Better," she said, then softer. "Why didn't I get this from you this morning?" I told her a truth. Failure teaches you to flinch. I had been careful when I needed to be decisive. I didn't say she scared me. She leaned back. The leather creaked. For a moment, the distance between us felt less like rank and more like 2 people on opposite shores deciding whether to attempt the swim. "Daniel Harper," she said. "I set ultimatums because most people ignore gentle warnings. I don't enjoy them." She took off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. Without the frames, something unguarded showed. "Send this to the board by 8 and sleep tonight. Fear ruins math." I sent the file at 7:54. In the elevator, we met again. Just the 2 of us. "You were brave to bring it back," she said, not looking at me. The word surprised me, but the way she said it, gentle, almost private, stayed. When the doors opened, she turned. "Improve," she added, "and make me glad I didn't fire you." Then she walked into the chill evening. I stepped outside with a strange lightness. The ultimatum remained, but it had softened into a promise I would have to earn. I thought about the crater the startup left and wondered whether something could grow there again. Disciplined, steady, maybe even tender. I thought about Catherine Wells at her desk, city coins behind her, voice low when the office empties. I don't know what will happen tomorrow. I only know I'll be there early with a tie I remember to wear and a report that doesn't flinch. I heard the click of her office door and thought she was leaving. Instead, the lamp lit up and Catherine Wells's shadow stretched across the desk as if she were starting another day. I stood by the coffee machine, feeling the air tighten in my chest. Her "either you improve or I'll fire you" doesn't vanish after a single correction. My name is Daniel Harper, 34. I'm learning not to tremble before numbers or people who see through every excuse. Tonight, I stayed late on purpose to prove I could take a hit and fix what had fallen apart in the morning. Her deputy, Edward Turner, appeared beside me. His smile was even, his voice smooth, but his eyes were measuring. Keeping an eye on changes, he nodded toward the tables. "Don't burn out." I told him everything was under control. He placed a flash drive on my desk. "Latest shipping rates. Add them in. It'll be perfect." When he left, I opened the files and felt a chill. The numbers were too neat. I called the carrier. The official rates were different. Someone wanted me to look careless. I recalculated the models, log sources, saved call records, and with clenched jaw removed from the report everything that smelled like a trap. At 10:07 p.m., I knocked on her office door. She didn't lift her eyes, only gestured to the chair. In the half-light, her face looked calm, but her hands betrayed fatigue. Fingers pressed against her temple. I laid it out briefly. Data tampering, verification, solution, and risks. She glanced at the flash drive, then at me. Why did you check? I shrugged. Because I don't want to be afraid again, and fear ruins reason. The silence lasted a few heartbeats. Well done, Daniel Harper, she said, and for the first time smiled like a human being. She stood, looked out the window where the city glowed like scattered coins. Do you know why I stay so late? Her voice softened. When I leave early, the water drains, and I see the bottom. And at the bottom, it's not just numbers. It's my mistakes and the fear of looking weak. I wanted to say, I knew that cold. Instead, I said, I can test the strength of walls. First numbers, then decisions. She gave a slight nod, as if locking away something fierce and tender at once. Sit, she asked and poured water. We went through scenarios, accept the new rates, lose flexibility, negotiate, save money, and buy time. I could hear her confidence returning. Not loud, but durable. You're different today, she said, setting the glass aside. Not cautious, but brave. I felt those words settle as a support. Courage isn't gestures, I answered. It's coming back after failure and doing it right. She smiled faintly. Then come tomorrow at 7:30. We'll see how it works with the board. Her voice was almost gentle with steel at the end, but the steel had gained warmth. When I stood, she took off her glasses and placed them on the desk. Precise and slow. Daniel Harper, she said quietly, I won't shield you from blows. But if you stand beside me, I won't let you be struck unfairly. She looked at the flash drive. I realized tomorrow would be tough, and for the first time I wanted it that way. I stepped into the empty corridor, the lamps humming like a distant power plant, and saw myself in the dark glass with straighter shoulders. At home, I reread my note. Fear ruins math, I added. Honesty repairs it, and fell asleep without the stone under my ribs. Before sleep, I remembered how she stood by the window, covering her eyes with her palm as if weighing the heaviness of solitude. I knew clearly my duty tomorrow was not to fall, hers not to retreat. If we managed it together, it would mean more than a correct report. It would be a day where nothing is more frightening than the quiet tenderness that appears where yesterday there was only an order. And Edward Turner, I was sure, was already preparing new traps. Because silence before the board never lasts long. I didn't know what was heavier, the morning chill in the company lobby or the eyes on me when Catherine Wells and I walked into the boardroom together. I wore my best navy suit, which always felt borrowed, while she was dressed in black, understated yet commanding. Her stride was steady, shoulders squared, but in the profile of her face, I caught a shadow of weight she carried alone. The directors sat in a semicircle, polished wood, reflecting their silver watches. Edward Turner was already there. His tie a little too perfect, his smile waiting to catch me off guard, and next to him sat James Carver, the investor. I had seen him only in passing before, tall, white-haired, his cufflinks screaming old money, his gaze scanning the room like he owned it. In some ways, maybe he did. The meeting began with Catherine Wells's voice sharp and precise, walking the board through projections. I slid her updated report in front of each director, watching their brows lift, some nodding, some frowning. Edward Turner interjected once, pointing at a figure he clearly hoped was a flaw. But Catherine Wells didn't even glance at me. She defended the number herself, clean and confident, as if to say, I trust this man's work. Then James Carver leaned back, folding his hands across his chest. Impressive adjustments, he said, his tone smooth like aged whiskey. But tell me, Miss Wells, how much of this is truly your vision, and how much belongs to your analyst? His eyes flicked to me like a spotlight, and the air thinned. Catherine Wells's jaw tightened. Every number comes from my team, she said, controlled. I don't hire people to decorate chairs. The room chuckled lightly, but the point was made. Still, James Carver didn't look away from me. His smirk said what his words didn't. You don't belong here. After the meeting, as directors filtered out, Edward Turner lingered, pretending to shuffle papers. James Carver approached Catherine Wells directly, lowering his voice, but not enough to hide it. Catherine Wells, you need stronger allies. I've always been one call away. His hand brushed the back of her chair like he was entitled to the space. I stood frozen, the professional in me screaming to step back, but something else anchoring me in place. Catherine Wells didn't flinch. Thank you, James Carver, she said coolly, but I have what I need. When he left, the silence was thick. She gathered her notes, and for a second, her hands trembled before she studied them. She looked up at me. You shouldn't let him get to you. I'm not worried about me, I answered, quieter than I meant. Her eyes lingered on mine longer than they should have. Long enough that I caught something hidden. Fatigue, yes, but also a question she wasn't asking out loud. I thought of James Carver's hand on her chair and felt something tighten in my chest. That evening, I skipped the train and walked home. The city lights like restless stars around me. I kept replaying the way James Carver had looked at her, at me, at the gap between us. And I kept replaying how she hadn't corrected him by saying just my employee. She had said team. Later that week at a company event held in the glass atrium downtown. The tension returned. Music floated. Waiters passed champagne and Catherine Wells looked every bit the untouchable executive in a midnight dress. James Carver was there too, circling like a shark, his laughter too loud. I watched him lean in, whisper something at her ear that made her lips tighten. I didn't realize I'd moved closer until she turned suddenly and caught me watching. Her eyes held mine, steady, unblinking, and for the first time, she smiled. Not the cool professional smile, but something smaller meant for no one else in the room. It was gone in a second, replaced with the armor she wore so well. But that single flicker told me two things. I wasn't imagining this pull between us. And James Carver was not just an investor, he was a rival. On the train ride home, I gripped the rail and asked myself the question I didn't want to face. Was I falling for her? And if I was, what chance did a man like me have against men who already owned half the city? The trap came on a Tuesday. I was halfway through lunch at my desk when an email pinged from Edward Turner. Subject line, urgent client escalation. Attached was a report stamped with my initials, though I hadn't written a word of it. The numbers were sloppy, projections off by millions. If it reached the board, it would ruin me. I stormed down the hall, but Edward Turner was already in Catherine Wells's office. His voice a low, measured tone. I warned you, he was saying. He's reckless. I found this in circulation under his name. When I walked in, Catherine Wells's eyes shifted to me, sharp as glass. The report lay open on her desk. Daniel Harper, she said, her voice level. Why do I have this with your signature? My throat went dry. I explained quickly, showing the discrepancies, the mismatched formatting, the metadata that proved it wasn't mine. Edward Turner folded his arms, pretending to look wounded. Blame is easy, he muttered. But Catherine Wells didn't let him finish. Out, she said, and her tone left no room for debate. Edward Turner stiffened, then left, the door clicking shut behind him. I stood there, my hands clammy, waiting for the blow to fall. Instead, she leaned back in her chair, staring at me with something unreadable. Why should I believe you? She asked finally. The question cut deeper than the accusation. Because beneath it wasn't doubt in my numbers, it was doubt in me. I drew a breath, steadied myself. Because I care more about this company than saving face, and because I stopped, then forced the words out. Because I care about you, Catherine Wells. The silence was instant, heavy. She blinked once slowly, like she hadn't expected me to cross that line. You realize what you're saying? Yes, I said. I know the risks. I know how it sounds. But everything I've done here, working late, pushing past the fear, it's because I wanted your respect. And somewhere along the way, it became more than that. Her lips parted, but no words came. She turned toward the window, the skyline burning in late afternoon gold. When she spoke again, her voice was softer. Do you think I built all this without walls? Every man who's ever stood in front of me wanted something. Money, power, access. I gave them nothing they could hold. That's how I survived. I'm not asking for anything, I said, my voice low. Just trust, even if it's only once. She turned back to me then, and for the first time, her eyes weren't made of steel. They were weary, vulnerable, like someone standing on the edge of a cliff, measuring the drop. Trust is the most dangerous currency I have, she whispered. I took a step closer, careful not to push. Then spend it wisely on me. Her breath caught for a long moment. We just stood there, the city lights flickering on behind her like a constellation. Finally, she reached out, brushing her fingers against the forged report. If I back you, she said, and you fail me, I lose more than a contract. I lose the one thing I swore I'd never give away. What's that? I asked. My belief that I can do this alone. I wanted to tell her she didn't have to do it alone, that maybe she never had to, but the words stuck in my throat. Instead, I held her gaze until she sighed, closing the report with a decisive snap. Very well, I'll defend you, but Daniel Harper. Her voice trembled for the first time since I'd known her. Don't make me regret it. When I left her office, the hallway felt different. Quieter, heavier, charged. I crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. But the strange thing was, I didn't feel fear anymore. I felt like I'd finally told the truth. The boardroom was colder than usual that Thursday. Maybe it was the polished glass table. Maybe it was the silence before the storm. Catherine Wells sat at the head, immaculate in a slate gray suit. I was 2 seats down, heart pounding, Edward Turner across from me with a smug tilt to his mouth. James Carver, the investor, leaned back like a king, awaiting a trial he had already won. The agenda was simple. Review the latest contracts, decide whether to expand distribution, and though it wasn't written anywhere, decide whether I would remain in this company. Edward Turner spoke first, presenting the forged report as evidence of my recklessness. He spun the numbers like daggers, each slide designed to paint me as a liability. James Carver nodded along, his gaze sliding to Catherine Wells. You can't afford sentiment, Catherine Wells, he said smoothly. Your job is to protect this company, not rescue strays. The word stray burned, but I stayed quiet. I had already made my case to Catherine Wells. Today it wasn't about my voice. It was about hers. When Edward Turner finished, Catherine Wells didn't look at me. She tapped her pen against the folder. Steady, measured. Finally, she stood, her voice clear. This company was not built by perfection. It was built by risk. By men and women who dared to fail and then stood back up stronger. Daniel Harper is not reckless. He is exactly what we need. Unafraid of the truth, even when it hurts. Edward Turner tried to interject, but she raised a hand. I reviewed the metadata myself. The report was falsified, not by Daniel Harper. Her gaze swept the table, landing briefly on Edward Turner, long enough to chill the room. If you want someone who plays it safe, who never questions, who never pushes, hire a clerk. I will not dismiss the one man who reminded me what it means to fight for this company. The silence was electric. James Carver cleared his throat, but even he seemed unsettled. You're staking your reputation on him? Yes, Catherine Wells said simply. And if that costs me, so be it. No one argued after that. The meeting moved on, but the decision had been made. Edward Turner sat rigid, his jaw tight, and James Carver leaned back with a look that said this wasn't over. But for the first time, I didn't feel small under their eyes. I felt seen when it ended. I gathered my notes and prepared to leave quietly. Catherine Wells closed her folder and spoke softly. Stay. The room emptied. Just the two of us remained. She exhaled, shoulders loosening, the mask slipping at last. You realize what you've done? She asked. I didn't do anything, I said. You did. You defended me. Her eyes softened, something fragile breaking through the steel. You think I defended you for you? She shook her head faintly. No, Daniel Harper. I defended you because you reminded me that I don't have to carry this alone. For years I've been armor. And then you walked in with your flaws, your fear, your honesty. And suddenly, the armor felt heavy. I stepped closer, every word sinking deep. Then let me carry some of it. For a moment, the world shrank to the space between us. The hum of the city below, the muted light of the skyline, her breath catching just slightly. It was all that existed. She didn't move away. She didn't look past me. She just held my gaze steady, vulnerable. Finally, she whispered, "You made me glad I didn't fire you." A faint, tired smile curved her lips, but her eyes glistened with something more. And that terrifies me. I wanted to reach for her hand, but I didn't. Not yet. It was enough to know she had let me in, enough to feel the current between them. We left the office together that night side by side. The city air was sharp, but I felt lighter than I had in years. She walked a step ahead, her heels clicking against the pavement, and then slowed, matching my stride. For the first time, she wasn't leading or commanding. She was simply walking with me. I don't know what tomorrow will bring. Politics, rivals, maybe more traps. But as we moved into the night, I realized I no longer feared the battles ahead. Because somewhere between an ultimatum and a boardroom war, Catherine Wells had stopped being just my CEO. She had become the one person whose faith meant everything.